Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining the latest Boutique Hotel News webinar. In fact, I should probably say good evening too, as I know some of our speakers are very much into their evenings now. This is our first webinar back after the festive break. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainable procurement and supply chain management, an important topic for our first episode back. For those of you who might not know me, my name's Eloise Hanson. I'm your host for today's webinar. And day to day, I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News. Boutique Hotel News is a multimedia trade publication, and we cover the global boutique, lifestyle, and luxury hotel industry. We have two sponsors of today's webinar. In fact, they're sponsoring our whole sustainability themed webinar series. Our first is Beyond Green, a sustainable hotel collection part of Preferred Travel Group. And we have a short video to intro the brand today. Details about Beyond Green have been popped into the chat there. Our second sponsor of today's webinar is Ruckus, a provider of network infrastructure. And once again, we have a very short video to play for you today.
Ruckus solutions deliver operational efficiencies that are crucial for maintaining profitability and enhancing guest satisfaction. Improving staff safety and inventory management with location tracking and panic button solutions. Boosting employee efficiency to maximize time utilization for enhanced customer service. Every hotel system operating seamlessly under a single network for unified workflows and simplified management. Ruckus solutions empower hospitality businesses to reduce their environmental footprint, conserve resources, and contribute to a more sustainable future. Reducing energy costs with IoT-enabled thermostats for sustainability, and enabling remote monitoring and control of building systems and equipment. Designed to support current and future standards, protocols, and technologies, all fully backed by the expertise and support of a leader in hospitality solutions. Optimize every hotel with always-on Wi-Fi, smart technology, service efficiency, and customer loyalty, and sharing their experiences with others, so you can improve occupancy rates, RevPAR, and guest satisfaction scores. It's time to differentiate your property, minimize costs, and drive revenue performance. Unlock the future of hospitality with Ruckus Solutions.
Again, further details on Ruckus are in the chat if you would like to learn more. So here's our superb lineup of speakers today, and I'm going to ask each to introduce themselves very briefly, and it's going to be easier for me to move left to right as per the PowerPoint slides. So let's kick off with Natasha. Welcome, and over to you. Oh, you're on mute.
Of course I am. Thank you. My name is Natasha Lee. I'm the Managing Director of ESG Pro, which is a UK-based ESG and sustainability firm. We work with businesses of all sizes, from SMEs to international corporations. Over the years, I've had the privilege of leading a wide range of projects, which included designing social impact frameworks in Kenya, working on governance strategies with Saudi Arabia, and helping with the integration of Hong Kongers to the UK under the B&O visa scheme. In addition to the consultancy work, I'm really excited to share that I've recently authored and published the Hospitality Industry ESG and Sustainability Handbook, which is currently available for free via the ESG Pro website.
Brilliant. Thanks, Natasha. And Christian, over to you. Welcome.
Good evening from Cambodia. My name is Christian de Boer, and I run a tiny little hotel in the middle of nowhere, Siem Reap, Cambodia. We're a 36-room hotel. only Khmer staff, only full-time staff. We're an advisor to the United Nations. We have been single-use plastic free now for 8+ years. And we're also recently been awarded the only or the #1 hotel in the world with regards to our reviews and comments site. We have not had a single complaint in 8 years from anywhere on any channel. And that is, I think, thanks to my staff. And it's a testament that the world is ready to go single-use plastic free. It's a testament that the world is ready for sincere and concrete actions, which go a lot further than a lot of empty words.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. And thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us. Jessica, over to you and welcome.
Hi, so I'm Jessica Black. I'm Director of Purchasing for Firmdale Hotels in London and New York. My background is all hospitality, and I've worked actually with Firmdale now for 25 years, from an operational level to this role, opening and looking after the operational purchasing department.
Thank you, Jessica. Glad to have you on today's call. And last but by no means least, Jason, and good evening to you as well.
Yeah, good evening from Bangkok. So Jason, I am the CEO of Wayfarer Travel, established in 2012. We've gone from being a safari-only company to we are now a global tailor-made travel company. So we do experiential travel. And we have a massive focus on who we work with, sustainable trips, the type of clients that we work with, the education of those clients. From my standpoint, it's an interesting one because it's always about common sense, the balancing of the size of a business relative to what you can really do, but constantly looking at what you can do and how you do more each time better, and that constant drive to bring the customer along on the journey as well.
Brilliant. We have 4 very passionate professionals on today's call, so I'm really looking forward to getting stuck in. If you'd like to connect with any of our speakers, their LinkedIn profiles into the chat. I'm sure there's a lot today that we probably won't get time to cover if you do have any further questions. So we're going to spend around 45 minutes in conversation today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from our audience. So if you do have any pressing questions, please submit these using the Q&A functions at the bottom of your screen. I'll get round to asking those as and where relevant. And today's webinar is being recorded. Everybody that has registered will receive a copy of that recording within 48 minutes or so. So before we get stuck in, I always like to provide some context to today's conversation. I think it just helps to set the scene. And this slide is really an overview of all the progress that some hospitality groups are making towards achieving net zero. So Preferred Travel Group and Marriott have in the last 6 months or so outlined their goals to reach net zero by 2050. And we also have some independent properties here on your screen, Room 2 Manchester, Populous, and Zeal Hotel, which is actually part of IHG, that have either already opened or are due to open in 2025. In fact, the Room 2 Manchester project is due to open in 2027. It's just received planning consent, and it's believed to be the largest net zero tower in the world when it gets developed. And on the next slide, I'm just going to rattle out some facts for you because Greenview, which is they've just launched a report called the Green Lodging Trends Report. This is talking about the first headline that's on your screens here. And in this report, it showed that 93.2% of all hotels globally, or that have been surveyed in that report, are tracking carbon emissions, typically at least once a month. 90.9% of all hotels have also implemented an action plan to reduce carbon emissions, but only 6.1% of all hotels use renewable sources for their energy needs. So the report highlights an increase in hotels tracking their emissions, yet underscores a gap between the environmental commitments and tangible actions, particularly around energy consumption. The middle headline here, French Parliament passed a bill in 2020 that made it mandatory for all tourist establishments to guarantee climate commitments. And by 2026, so next year, all French hotels nationwide must sign up to one of various eco-label certification schemes. And these are obligations that form part of the government's initiative to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. While the demand from hotels for these various eco-labels are on the up, I believe there's been a 70% uptick in hotels trying to receive these certifications. It's reported that government subsidies for green change is actually behind the surge. So we'll see what 2025 has in store for that sector. And just to end on today's context, the CSRD, which is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, I believe is the acronym for it, which mandates companies to disclose information not just about their own activities, but also about their value chain. So this includes their products, their services, and their business relationships. So organizations that are part of the EU and also some organizations that are actually non-EU will be required to disclose information on their supply chains, which includes their environmental and social risks and impacts. This year, we're seeing the first tranche of companies report under that new directive, and there is now going to be a staggered approach up until 2029, where smaller companies then get brought into those publishing requirements. So it means now that organizations must take responsibility for their suppliers. So on that note, let's kick off. And I want to start with a question to Natasha, if I may. What does sustainable procurement truly mean in practice? And what are those guiding principles that should be helping to steer or shape decision-making?
Well, so I think it's important to note that sustainable procurement is not just a buzzword. It's a transformational approach as to how organizations can better manage supply chains and ensure that every decision aligns with ESG principles. And the new UK Procurement Act is a really good example of where just procurement in general is going. In practice, it's going beyond the superficial claims, and it's focusing on it actually embedding sustainability into the procurement policies, processes, and decisions of being made by any company. So there's a few key things to consider. The first is rigorous policies that reflect company values, where the policies need to articulate the company's values regarding their procurement and regarding the supplier assessment practices that they're upholding, but also the values that they require their suppliers to uphold as well. So focusing on the longer term environmental and social impacts of procurement decisions, for instance, demonstrating ethical labor practices or environmental stewardship, and having robust governance structures. It's also about making sure that all of the pillars of the E, the S, and the G, they're being addressed, but they're going further. So the social pillar, we think of modern slavery assessment tools, but that's just scratching the surface. You also need to be taking account of diversity and inclusion, and being aware of not just your direct supply chain, but the tertiary levels of that supply chain, where you might be thinking about the raw materials and how those were mined, and that also needs to become audited, although that will take time. So sustainable procurement, it's taking the procurement decisions beyond an analysis of costs, because cheapest is no longer always the best, and it's actually about choosing the suppliers based on the company behind the product that you're purchasing. So typically a procurement team, they are the skilled individuals in analysing the resilience and the reliance and the quality of the product or service you're sourcing. But the next step is to actually be able to assess and audit the evidence that that supplier is giving to you. And a really good example is a carbon report. You need carbon data from your supply chain for your Scope 3 reporting. But if a procurement manager doesn't know what is valid and good methodology, they're ticking a box that they've received a carbon report from a supplier. But now you need a sustainability consultant to audit the validity of that report so that it can better inform their procurement decisions overall.
There's certainly been some challenges when it comes to the S in ESG. How do you quantify and how do you measure? I know there's it is a tricky one. Maybe we'll touch on that today. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, Natasha, as to how you would advise someone to look further in the S.
Yeah, so I mean, the modern slavery assessment tools are obviously a good starting point, but it really comes to being able to audit. For instance, if your supplier has ESG reporting in place, then you can weight those pillars. So one of the easiest strategies really is about asking your supply chain to also conduct ESG reporting against a consistent standard, be it the B Corp or the GRI. They're actually one and the same, but having the right framework in place so that when you're comparing multiple suppliers on their ESG, that there's maybe a rating that you can quantify the statements they're otherwise presenting. But ultimately, the S, but I would also say the G is difficult to audit in the supply chain as well, because that's looking at the policies and being able to have the assurance from your suppliers that they don't just have the right policies to tick off in that PQQ, but they also are practicing and following those policies and procedures. And that's where we kind of come full loop, where you need to choose suppliers that have strong governance practices so that you can trust the credibility of their proclaimed social and environmental impacts.
Thanks, Natasha. I'm going to bring Jessica into the conversation here, because Natasha just mentioned that with the procurement teams, they have to be incredibly rigorous. You have a meticulous attention to detail. I'm just curious, Jessica, what's been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced when you're trying to manage those Scope 3 emissions within your supply chain, particularly as I know Firmdale has hotels not just in and around London, but now New York as well. So you're also looking at different locations, geographies, and I imagine different regulations, perhaps.
Yeah.
Could you talk to us about your experience?
Look, one of the main challenges is how many suppliers we have in the hospitality industry from all over the departments, and they're all offering very different products and what we want to achieve for the end client. So we have to map out our key areas. There are areas that are clearly a lot bigger than others, and we need to see which ones have the highest emissions to allow us to have a strategic plan each year, so we know what we're going to concentrate on. Once you understand that, then you can work with the suppliers individually. We're very lucky in Firmdale. We decided one of our major sources was the laundry in terms of controlling and the waste. So we bought our own laundry, which allows you to control that supplier from within it. And over the last couple of years, we've worked really, really hard with the laundry to make it plastic free, to ensure that, something Natasha said, going the sustainable way is not the cheapest way. But we invested in the reusable garment bags, the laundry bags. We've invested in electric vehicles to deliver the laundry. We've invested in upgraded tunnel washers, so we're using less water coming through to wash that. by sort of controlling it from within, we control the road miles in and to our hotels of that supplier. So it's more of a loop there. And also buying effectively, buying the correct par of the linen, so you're not putting your linen under pressure, makes a big difference. And you're also placing, larger orders at sort of timely with the supplier to work with them, so then they can cost it and manage it and make it, effectively, both financially and sustainably. Quite a big chunk there, but we've looked at every single supplier coming into the laundry down to the chemicals. Can we have concentrate chemicals so we're bringing less in? How can we turn this around to make, something that's massive into us, but control it? But we do that with also a lot of our smaller suppliers as well. So, it's really about understanding your usage, but doing something with that data. Why are we using that? How are we using it? How could we be buying differently, and not being afraid of change just because it's something that we've historically done or the guests stereotypically expect from a 5-star hotel? How can we change to have a better quality, sustainable product? And that is down to, looking at a silly example is talking to, say, our fabric suppliers that make our curtains and our mannequins. What do they do with the waste? Because that's about a cost for them and a carbon cost coming through. And it's about taking back that waste and seeing what we can do with it. So we've turned that material into canapé trays or teddy bears or stockings. So we're almost trying to affect their change as well by really looking at what those suppliers are doing and how we can work in partnership with them, as opposed to dictating for us, because we are not the big boys, of the tick boxes. How can we make a change with some of the small things? How can we be that considerate hotelier that, understands what our goals and our aspirations are, so we can do better? And it's about picking each product that historically has got a lot of plastic or, the background behind it. Slippers for years used to come, with a plastic sole in a plastic bag. We now have them with an environmental recycled cotton, with an environmental recycled sole in a reusable cotton dust bag. It's little things like that we have to challenge without it compromising that end guest, because we're in luxury, we're in 5-star. And once we cut back, people just think we're being tight. We're not being tight. We want to give them a great product that sustainably makes us very proud to give that product out. Hopefully that might have.
Yeah, I imagine it's very difficult as well, knowing Ferndale well, and the design ethos behind it, balancing the luxury end and that aesthetic design with cost-effective decisions.
Design doesn't always have to be new, and I think that's one thing that Kit does incredibly well. She upcycles and turns something that was, once loved in its day to something else that's now, and that's something we're seeing more and more with Kit, and it's fantastic to see it, because then it creates such a lovely story behind anything. We hate to see anything thrown away, and that's one thing that we work really, really hard on our waste going out. What can we do before it even gets to that stage?
Natasha, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on something Jessica said there, which was the collaborative approach. And I think that's really important when we're talking about procurement, but especially sustainable procurement. Collaborative compliance is essential, because you need to drive down your own impacts and harms through your supply chain. And you can only do that by A, having quality and consistent data from your suppliers, and B, having your suppliers proactively working on that journey to improving their impacts alongside you. So it's really interesting where we have kind of two approaches to supply chain audit. We've got the traditional ones, which are very top down. They're a burden. They are a demand on suppliers to provide data, whether you have it or not, find it and give it to us, we need it, versus working with your suppliers and explaining, this is the journey we're on, this is why we need this data from you. And there is a movement to actually creating a more socially responsible approach to supply chain auditing that makes it so that those suppliers are supported in filling the data gaps when they're discovered, rather than having their contracts cut because they can't provide the data in the first place. So it all comes back to it being a collaborative effort.
Mm-hmm. I think something can be said here about investment, and I say this because Jessica mentioned about the costs that Firmdale took to develop the laundry in-house and invest in EV vehicles and the textiles and such. But there's also, I would imagine, some smaller cost-effective steps that even smaller independent hotels could take to just start that ball rolling, but that also may come as an investment to time and resource in educating your suppliers and how to ensure that the industry move forwards as a whole. So Christian, you're a small hotel, quote unquote, in the middle of nowhere. Would love to come and see you at some point. 36 rooms, I believe you said. What are some of the practical and cost-effective first steps that other independent hotels can take to start addressing this?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I personally think that we need to rethink the complete hotel industry. There's a lot of chain hotels, there's a lot of bigger hotels that really haven't changed the way they work since the 80s or the 90s. It is 2025 right now. It's time that we rethink a lot of other stuff. Now, as a new hotel, albeit 8.5 years old now, we've been able to do that from day one. So our goal was to be single-use plastic-free from day one. Our goal was to have the best English classes in Siem Reap, and our goal was to only work with full-time staff. Even though Siem Reap is very seasonal, we only have full-time staff. It's one of the very few hotels. So how can I afford all of those things and yet be privately owned, independent, in the middle of nowhere? We have completely cut our complete sales and marketing team. We do zero. If you think about the costs that we save as a result of that, that's really a fortune as big as you can, or at least we could buy a car from that. And that's only as a small hotel. By saving that amount of money, we obviously do not travel. We're not part of anything. We're not part of the SLHs and the Virtuosos of the world. Saving, again, an enormous amount of money, which I can directly reinvest, one into my staff, only full-time staff, one into healthcare and all kinds of other stuff, and a very simple initiative that I started 8.5 years ago, and in its heydays before COVID ended up in 19 different countries all over the world. Our guests get one of those bottles. You could call it marketing because it has my name on it, or the hotel name. And they can take it home. They can put water in it here, or tea or coffee or whatever else at home. As a result, that bottle can be refilled 1 million times. And that is indeed what we see people do. They do bring it home and they keep on reusing it. So that's how it all started. That was the base. We then had a meeting with our various suppliers. The fact that climate change is an issue is enormously real here in Cambodia. Cambodia is a country. It will be the world's second most affected country by climate change. If you let those numbers sink in, the future is really scary. The UN wrote a report about 9 years ago where they were predicting the future of Cambodia with more poverty, more diseases, more droughts, more floods, more death. More death. That's the future of the children of my staff. That's a heartbreaking thought. It's caused by the West, largely. Cambodia, we don't really have many emissions. So when I had a meeting with all of our delivery people, about the reason why I did not want our bananas, our this, or whatever it is, to be delivered in plastic anymore. I showed them a video of the plastic, which is right now floating in the oceans. That video lasted 6 minutes. And after that 6 minutes, our complete delivery team was on board. Everyone was, of course, we're going to do this. They had one question. And keep in mind that Cambodia might not be the most educated country in the world. How will my executive chef, who is Khmer, how will my chef see if a banana is a good banana? In most other hotels in Siem Reap, if something is not in plastic, it's by definition not good. So if they want to bring me a good banana, they will have them wrapped in individual plastic bags. That's how I see if a banana is good. Now, when I said I will take responsibility for that, I would like to think I'm trained enough and my team is trained enough to see if a banana is good or not. When I said I will take that responsibility, okay, fine. Then that was the end of the discussions. I ordered about 300 linen bags. We gave 100 to the various suppliers. We kept 100. And whenever they brought a bunch of new bananas, they gave us the linen bag. We gave them an empty one bag. And that's how it went back and forth still today, 8.5 years ago. I'm not sure if I should make advertisement here, but our meat, our fish is delivered in very simple IKEA bags, large Tupperware things, i.e. reusable 1 million times. And it's the same bags that I bought 8 years ago at the IKEA in Bangkok. The solutions are so simple. It might be because we're only a 36-room hotel, could well be, but the solutions are really quite simple. And our guests are more than ready for it. Our guests are now actively choosing us because of this. It's also the reason why we are the busiest hotel in town, in competition with some of the world's biggest brands. Yet my tiny little hotel without a sales team performs better than any of them. The world is ready, but it's time that we make very active and decisive steps, and we stop hiding behind beautiful words and beautiful marketing slogans, what a lot of hotels in the West are unfortunately still doing. I'm a big fan of the new French law. I'm a big fan of all of the various global initiatives that are being undertaken. It, however, does frustrate me that a certain hotel group from a certain country, where in their own country they're not allowed to use plastic, that same hotel group here in Cambodia, no problem. How much plastic do you want? Because that law is only in that country. It's not a global law. And I think it's time we make it a global law.
I think you're touching on something much bigger, Christian, and that's actually psychology, and that's how the way that people think and act. And I can't imagine the changing the psychology of your local community, your staff, even a wider culture is an easy job by any means, but maybe one that needs to be addressed and done. So you mentioned sharing a video with one of your delivery teams, and they seem to get the message. But on the education side, when it comes to changing that psychology, how are you educating your suppliers, and what are the hurdles that you're finding in that? It sounds like most are on board anyway, but take the French law, for instance.
We honestly do not have any issues with our local suppliers. I have issues with my overseas suppliers, my London-based suppliers, my i.e. tour operators, who are tour operators and others who are a very active part of certain groups of people. They're very proud of the fact that they are sustainable and all kinds of other stunning words. Yet, the moment their guests arrive here in Siem Reap Airport, their guide, the very first thing they do, here's a plastic water bottle. That's the first thing before they even say welcome to Cambodia. That is what has to stop. If a company says, a tour company, a hotel, or this or whatever it is, says that they care for the environment, that they want to jump on the bandwagon, then it should be throughout their operation, not just in their head office somewhere in the United Kingdom. It should be on a global basis, and that includes people that arrive at Siem Reap Airport whilst it's 39 degrees Celsius outside and everyone is sweating. They should not give a single-use plastic water bottle. There are now so many alternatives. The guest at no point has ever asked, I want plastic water bottle. What they ask, even though they might have used the words, I want clean drinking water that I can drink. So no one is asking for plastic. They want clean drinking water. Now, that clean drinking water can be done in glass. It can be done in this bottle. Can be lots of other stuff. I mean, it's not that long ago that all over Europe, milk was being delivered in a glass bottle. Why can't we go back to something that used to work pretty good down then in those days? So why can't we do water in a glass bottle and give it to the guests when they're at the airport? It does not have to be in plastic, and it needs to be stopped, and it needs to be stopped urgently before it's simply too late for the people of Cambodia that are being born today. And that really is my staff and their children.
Thanks, Christian. Jessica, your hand is up.
I was just really going to go talk about Christian's point on education and educating the suppliers, something that we feel really strongly on the education, but to educate the staff as well. We start the staff's journey with us in their employment. They get given a bag for life, a water bottle for life, to really show the staff what our passions and our goals are, and to very much open the floor that if they see stuff, because as you get bigger and you're not one hotel and you have a chain of hotels, to get them to be able to say, hey, this supplier that's delivering to us, they're delivering it this and this. So we raise awareness that we're able to make change on the ground, and we can only do that unless we really commit to our staff and show our staff what our goals are. And we've done this for years with a whole idea of love what you do. So we very much encourage our suppliers to come in and train the staff, show the staff why we've picked that supplier, why they're important to us, and what they do, from, you know, an artisan to a sustainable, delivery. And it's something that we feel really strongly about, is the training, without a doubt. You can look at as many facts as data, but without the passion behind the team and the suppliers, you won't succeed to make a change across all levels.
We're hosting a later webinar in this series all about how to create a sustainable culture at your hotel. So it's going to be dealing directly with how do you communicate and empower your staff members, but also other stakeholders too. So if anyone's interested, would love to get you involved. Natasha, I'll come to you shortly because I'm very aware that Jason has been sat here so patiently whilst we've been chatting away. And I think Christian made a really good point, actually, that so much of the challenges actually happen off property. And this is why supply chain management and sustainable procurement can be really tricky when it comes to mapping scope 3, because so much happens pre and post trip before you even arrive at your hotel. And Jason, you actually source travel in its multitude of ways. So what's your approach to sustainable sourcing across a much wider range of suppliers and service providers? And perhaps more importantly, how are you ensuring that such a vast and wide net is adhering to your standards as a business and what you value?
Yeah, so I'll start off with where we came from. So we came from a luxury safari travel company. So we were fortunate in many respects because we deal with the higher end clients. So in the luxury space, when you're dealing with high-end properties, they've got greater resources. They do tend to have a greater focus on doing the right thing, and that is a fact. If you look at our top properties in Kenya, they're impeccable. They're running generators. Their supply chains are phenomenal. Their local sourcing models are incredible. You'll never see a plastic bottle anywhere on any of those properties, which is a great thing. So part of it from us is recognizing the properties and the supply chain that we work with that do a great job. Now, what do you do with that? it's about taking that and then bringing it down to those next levels. The biggest thing that I've seen that I don't agree with is the carrot and stick model, penalizing people because they're not meeting the standards. You're gonna take people out of the overall supply chain, and you're gonna stop everything from the ability to rise. So what we did is we identified 3 levels within our supply chain. So obviously what we call our Eco Gold, and that's our premium suppliers that are, there's not much they're doing wrong, right down to local sourcing, even at the point where they've got electric vehicles, they're talking about their transport suppliers, also about electric vehicles for delivery to their sites. And some of these sites are pretty remote, right? So when you start talking at those levels, cost, complexity, an electric vehicle breaking down en route to a remote location, all of these things get very, very, very complex. So taking the top echelon, what they do, identifying that, promoting that, and we do promote that to our clients. So we have Eco Gold, and then we have our Eco by Wayfarer, which is the next tier down, and we're talking to the Eco Gold across to the Eco Wayfarer and saying, right, there's some stuff going on here that we can cross-pollinize, and we can, this learning opportunity, and then taking it down to the people that aren't qualifying and saying, how do we move the needle? A simple one. Stop using plastic bottles. So, pretty much our entire supply chain, there'd be the odd exception, because you asked the question, how do you get them to adhere? You get them to adhere by them understanding the importance and the value and the fact that it is something that's meaningful for all the reasons that we know: sustainability, to stay in business, to be recognized, because there is a shift now with the clients. And the biggest thing we're seeing with the clients is they're starting to ask the questions. Are these suppliers doing the sustainable things? If something pops up where a client doesn't think it's sustainable, we'll start to see them raising their hands now. That's been a massive, massive, massive shift, which we embrace. We encourage clients. So we have post-trip calls and we ask questions. Was there anything that concerned you? Did everything look to be in order? I can't remember a client call where there was feedback. And I've got 45 people taking calls, hundreds and hundreds of calls. We had 2,300 travelers last year, and not a single mention of any of our suppliers using single-use plastic. Not one mention. Do that 3 years ago, and that wouldn't have been the case. So again, it's taking the top echelon, keeping on working with them, recognizing what they're doing and promoting that, because you do need to promote that. That's only fair that you promote that to the clients, and then bringing that down to the next group, and then working with the lower tiers to say, how do you get on board? Where's your starting point? Get that starting point. Once you've got a starting point, you've got somewhere to come from and you've got somewhere to go to.
I definitely think having that clear framework I think you have to break it down into very digestible chunks in order to start stimulating or galvanizing or motivating action. You mentioned something a moment ago, Jason, that your clients are more discerning now. They're asking the questions and they're clearly more aware of not just climate change and sustainability, perhaps on the flip side, greenwashing, and they're not scared to voice it when they see it. So what are the most common forms of greenwashing that you're seeing in the travel industry today?
Most of it's across flights, and to Christian's point, it's the bigger entities. The big boys play the greenwashing game because it's a marketing tool, and it's an easy marketing tool, and it's an easy one to throw a label out on there. Look at Booking.com last year. They got absolutely persecuted over greenwashing, and they deserved it. So it's an easy marketing play. It's a lazy marketing play, but it's starting to become something that people are calling out. And when people see it, it's really starting to get the attention that it should be getting, and that's a good thing. So the more that happens, the better for everyone. One of the things that we've recently done is we've invested in how to pull in the data from Google. I mean, here's a really funny situation, right? Google already provide the data for the carbon emissions by flight, but very few people are actually presenting that to clients and saying, you can choose this flight and your carbon emissions are this, but if you choose this flight, you're dropping your carbon emissions by 20%. Okay, you've got to make a couple of adjustments on your trip. but you're going to contribute. Which do you want to choose? Yeah, and they're really simple things that it's a tool that's available that you can pull the data in right now. Google's done all the hard work. Pull their data, use it, show it to the clients, give them the choice. You can't force choice on clients, but you can start to influence their choices a lot more by being intelligent with the data that you present to them.
Are you finding that your clients or customers are more inclined to take the more sustainable option? And if so, are they having
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. Not yet. We're getting a feel of it. We're getting a smell of it, but it's not common practice. It's not their first thought. Their first thought is, I want a great trip. I want these experiences. I want. Afterwards, there may be, but again, it's our job to educate.
Yeah.
We're the ones with the data. We're the ones with the intent. We're the ones with the knowledge. So we've got to start the conversation. We've got to start the dialogue, which is what we're doing. We're threading it in, not too intrusively, because as soon as you start to get intrusive with clients, you'll start to lose them. So if you want to make progress, you've got to make progress on the client's terms. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful to listen and respond to the client, work with the client, and take the client on the journey on their terms.
Christian, I saw your hand.
Yes, a gentleman Jason just mentioned, indeed, for instance, amongst many others, Booking.com, which has labeled the whole of St. Reap sustainable. I can assure you that's not the case. The Booking.com has never been here. They have no clue if people are sustainable or not. But they have so much money. They can do whatever they want. And the vast majority of people will believe that. The bigger tour operators, they can really do whatever they want. Now they donate $100 and plant a couple of trees, and the whole world will believe it. The bigger hotel chains, it was not that long ago that we all, when we stayed in a particular hotel, in the bathrooms saw the little thing. At this hotel, we care for the environment. If you hang your towel, we will plant a tree. I was one of those lunatics who did that. I was one of the lunatics who actually physically hung my towel, feeling good about myself, thinking, you know what, they've planted a tree for me. It is now 2025. It's a couple of decades later. Those billions of trees that they've planted, because it's a hotel chain with 6,000 hotels, times 12 years, times, let's keep them small, 100 rooms a day. That's an Amazon rainforest that is planted somewhere by this particular hotel chain. Can somebody please provide me the Google Earth coordinates of where they've planted? It's a marketing thing. They've never planted a single tree. Now, we smaller hotels and smaller businesses are still, we do not get the credit straight away. We have to prove that we are actually physically walking the talk. Now, the best way of proving that I'm walking the talk is by simply doing it. I don't have to talk about it. People can see for themselves. People will experience it for themselves. And now, 8 years into this journey here, I don't need to prove myself anymore. It's there. The trees are growing. And that's where we smaller hotels are quicker. We're more agile. We're faster. But we can actually walk the talk. I would love the day that massive hotel chain is indeed able to showcase where they've planted those billions and billions of trees. And if somebody can, please tell me.
Noted. Natasha, your hand is up.
Yeah, I wanted to sort of touch on a few points that have been raised. And it's really interesting bringing the tree planting up, because what many don't realize is that tree planting, it takes on average 40 years for a tree to actually start sequestering carbon. So when we talk about greenwashing, and noting that greenwashing is a form of accountancy fraud, so the risks, not just reputational risks, but frankly litigation risks that can fall out of not always intentional greenwashing, but the over exaggerations of claims being made, or where we've planted these hundreds or thousands of trees, but as soon as you attribute a carbon offset to that project, then there becomes a risk. Whereas really it's biodiversity. That's a claim that could be made immediately. But there is a movement of fads, of trends, beehives on roofs, and every trend that we see in the big chains, and they spiral, and everybody goes, well, that's a really good initiative, we'll do that too. But there's not enough consideration being taken where these carbon initiatives have biodiversity impacts, or where they really are more of a biodiversity project rather than a carbon project. And I think with some of the new EU regulations that are stipulating that you have 10 days to prove a sustainability claim, or the new move across the EU that basically says that if your supplier practices human rights or environmental abuses and you are purchasing from them, you are you're culpable, you're facilitating that abuse. And that is, it's taking that risk to a whole different level for the business. And it all comes back to this point of the reports and the claims that are being made. CSR was lovely, but it was fluffy, and there wasn't enough substantiation to the claims in those reports. And ESG, there's a real push to say every claim, every statement has to be evidenced and substantiated. But how do you substantiate the impact that your project might have on a local community? And that's where the frameworks are so crucial. So I think I just wanted to kind of bring up that point of these reports and the idea that it is marketing. There is a competitive advantage. When Jessica was talking about choosing suppliers based on their environmental credentials, that shows that there's competitive advantage to the smaller business for having that in place. But it's also a question of, again, being able to validate those reports that you're seeing and knowing, are they taking liberties with what they're saying? How are they evidencing and proving these claims? And that's where you can go from having a competitive advantage to a risk.
Pasha, just to stay with you for a moment, you've talked about needing proof and evidence and needing to validate. So what metrics should hoteliers in this instance be tracking in order to have that data at hand? And just for instance, we've had a question come in from the audience about views on food waste and what should be done here. So what's your advice when it comes to the metrics and the data?
My first piece of advice is benchmark where you are today. Honestly, the number of businesses, not just in hospitality, but overall, where we go in and they say, oh, we have all of these amazing initiatives in place, and there will be statements on their websites about how, well, we've saved this much % of energy because we switched to LED light bulbs, or whatever the initiative was. And the problem is that very few of those companies can prove the benchmarking before they made that change. So how can you be certain of how much you've saved? Or because you're using statistics, you're taking national averages and you're saying, well, this must be an estimate of how much we've saved. But if you had done that benchmarking first and said, well, last year, this was our carbon emissions, and you account for your scope 3, because that's where over 80% of your emissions are. They're in your indirect categories. They're out of your control. That's your supply chain emissions. But if you have that benchmark and then you do those changes and you put your solar panels or you change your light bulbs, now you've got evidence, because your utility bill will show how much you've saved. And it really is just, don't put the cart before the horse. You need to benchmark first. And where you want to know which metrics, honestly, there are so many topics in ESG that you should be reporting against, but you don't have to do all of it all at once. If you take just emissions, that means that you're committing to measuring your waste, your food waste, but beyond your food waste, your refurbishment projects are generating waste. Who owns those emissions? So that has to be defined. But you're also looking at your energy and your water. So just the emissions topic is not actually as simple as saying, well, business commute. or any of those other somewhat easier topics. It's also considering the emission intensity in your water statements and disclosures and your waste as well. So sometimes we say in ESG reporting, it's about reasonability. What's reasonable for your business? What data is available right now that you could be reporting on? And which are the areas that are either they make sense from an operational efficiency standpoint, or which are the topics that are so pertinent to your stakeholders that they should be a priority, that you should invest in measuring. But that doesn't mean you have to bite off the whole cake in one go. ESG is about continuous improvement. You need to start, and you start by measuring the data that you can measure, whatever that is for your business.
Jessica, and then maybe I'll fire this one over to Jason as well, because I imagine you'll have very different viewpoints on this, but the types of questions that you're asking your suppliers during that procurement process in order to get the right data and the right metrics, etc. What are those questions that you are asking to ensure that you are making the right decision? Jessica, I'll start with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very much about honesty and loyalty when we're working with suppliers. It's very much about doing our research. Where are they established? Who do they work with? Are they open for us to come and see the production? It probably goes back to the whole training conversation and reviewing the businesses. Our questions really start with our brief and our goals and our aspirations and where we want to be, to then for them to be able to tell us how and what they can offer that match that. So it's very much about open, clear discussion with what's important and what they can do. And I think a lot of us have suppliers that we've worked with for years, and by not having those open discussions regularly, you don't know what new things they're doing. So you could be going out looking for something new, of the new shiny, this is what this, look at these new suppliers, they're doing this. And actually our current supplier, because we're not having regular open discussions, have moved on massively in sustainability, but they've always just kept us how it are. So I think it's not just about the new suppliers asking the questions, it's about your current suppliers as well. These are our goals. This is what's important to us. What are you doing new that can help us? Or it could be about identifying something that we've got. How can we produce that differently? How can you help us to produce that differently? Can you find me a UK supplier within your portfolio that can produce that for me with these elements? So it's about really working with people that really understand what we are. There are lots of hotels out there, but we're all very different. So how, what you might do for a large 1,000-bedroom Marriott hotel is completely different to what you would offer me. And it's about the supplier listening and really understanding and putting forward different options, and understanding what our brief is. I mean, I can take it to, every year Christmas, crackers is a major thing. It's something our guests expect to have. So rather than us buying something off the shelf, we decided we will make our own. And it's plastic free, it's recycled paper, without the bang. And what can we put in it that actually people will put in their handbag and reuse it? So we worked with our regular supplier and was like, we need you to find something in the UK, and we need to look at real eco proper gifts inside. So we went from like a plantable pencil and to a soap, something that they'll take away and understand, but it also promotes our luxury product. So I think the questions, they're ongoing. It's a little bit like Natasha touched on the modern slavery. We want a copy of their statement. Of course we do, and we want to read it. But really, the honest, open discussion will tell you whether or not they really believe and are passionate about delivering that. When people are giving you samples and understanding, it's listening to deliver what we're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Jessica. And Jason, you're coming at this question from a slightly different perspective, but what specific questions are you asking your supply chain when it comes to making those decisions as to partnerships, future work, etc.?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much on specific questions. I think it's much more on the relationship, the ethos of how you do business, understanding where we come from, also understanding the type of clients that we're bringing to these suppliers. Back to what I said earlier, and at the risk of repeating myself, we're very lucky because we started at the sort of top end, the pointy end of the stick with very, very high end suppliers. And it's taking what they do and translating it down. There's a massive element of trust, because if you're going to keep questioning people and you're going to keep throwing questions at them, you're going to break down that trust element. And once you start breaking down trust, how do you keep moving forward on the things that really matter? There's a bit of common sense, right? When you're working with people and you've got strong relationships, and we do have very strong relationships, you know, we're working, our top 10 suppliers represent well over 80% of our business. So when you've got your top 10 representing such a significant amount, you've got a close relationship with them. And when you've got that closeness of relationship, you've got a pretty good understanding of the type of people that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a bunch of ethical people, they're doing ethical stuff. If you're dealing with a bunch of cowboys, they're being cowboys. So again, you know, there's some really, really simple things that go missing just in the common sense space. And again, if you're working with common sense people that are ethical, they're doing the common sense stuff. So it then comes down to, as you add new suppliers, it's more on the consultation with them and understanding where they're coming from and getting to know them and understand them and how they operate. And I think there's a lot more that we can do in that space: build trust, talk common language, understand that clients are part of the process. And for us, the more we can do to educate clients to become more involved in the process and have a bigger voice, that's really your watchdog. Your clients, because, you know, I have 10 suppliers doing 80% of my business, yet I have over 2,000 clients visiting various sites around the world. Where am I going to get the most traction? I'm going to get the most traction by getting feedback from my clients. Why do we call every single client after a trip? So we get that feedback and we hear these things.
I think the topic of trust is, again, a huge topic within itself. And I think that feeds back to what Christian mentioned earlier, that it's not just about walking the walk, talking the talk, it's walking the walk. And there's a brilliant phrase called touch to trust, where I think until you can tangibly see the difference that is being made, that is when you will start to strengthen that trust. And I think a brilliant example of that is don't tell me that you're planting trees, show me that you're planting trees, and that trust will organically grow. I can see that we are 5 minutes over our allotted hour. There are so many questions that I wanted to ask, but we unfortunately don't have time. So another reminder that all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers are in the chat. Please do connect because there's a lot here that we didn't really touch on today. And we're going to leave this webinar open right at the end for an extra 2 minutes to allow our audience members to follow up on all the links that we've popped into the chat. It'll be well worth scrolling through. But I'll say a quick thank you to Natasha, Christian, Jessica and Jason for their time. I've just got a few closing slides to run through before we say goodbye. So my next webinar, interesting one, certainly touches on the S&G. On Monday, the February the 10th at 2 o'clock, same time, we are exploring the cost of neglect. So understanding duty of care and legal risks in hospitality. Again, a mammoth topic. Would love to see you there. Do join in the conversation. The link to register is popped into the chat. And we are running a competition currently. Any of you that subscribes to the Boutique Hotel newsletter by the 31st of March will be in a chance of winning a 6-month membership at the Karma Sanctum Soho. It's a fantastic hotel in London. All you've got to do is subscribe. Got to be in it to win it, right? So once again, the link to register and sign up has been popped into the chat. And the final piece of promotional activity I'd like to flag, the 10th edition of the Serviced Apartment Awards are taking place this year on the 13th of May in London. We've introduced a brand new category for this year to reflect how and where the sector is moving. And that category is the best hotel with serviced apartments or branded residences. It's free to enter. Again, you've got to be in it to win it. And you can find out more about the awards via the link in the chat. And if you're interested in working with us, oh, nope. One more event, I'm so sorry. We've got a practical AI workshop for the hotel and hospitality marketeers taking place on Thursday, the 6th of March in London. This is a full day hackathon, effectively. Bring your laptops and it's a collaborative workshop where we're going to explore what AI can do for you. So once again, the link to register is in the chat. And if you're interested in working with us, please do get in touch with my colleague Katie, either across our digital or in-person events. Her details have been popped into the chat and they're also on your screen. And a final thank you to our sponsors, Ruckus and Beyond Green, and once again, an applaud to our speakers. So thank you for joining in. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and I look forward to seeing you all on February the 10th. So take care for now and see you in a couple of weeks' time.